the market invest in girls by itself? Why do we have to intervene?
Well, I've been asking myself that question because as you see not only on international community, in any politically correct statement, women are essential. You mentioned it. Women are essential in the MDGs and the development area. Women are essential in the development as a whole, but it's not happening. Why? I believe that probably because we need to work much harder with the business community so they can increase the opportunities for women to have a possibility of better jobs. We need to increase the opportunity. We need also to I would say, work at the country levels in terms of how we ensure that women not only study the traditional study, usually as caregivers with very low salaries, but also go much more in science, innovation, technology, and so on. So there is a part here that must be done by the private sector, but also by governments.
Archbishop, you and the elders are addressing all kinds of global problems all around the world, and yet one of those that you and your colleagues have really chosen to focus on has been the empowerment of girls, and in particular the end of child marriage. Why do you give such a priority to focusing on girls?
I would have thought actually the answer is obvious. We've already heard that, I mean, when young girls are involved in sexual activity, infant mortality increases. But very straightforwardly, the evidence is that, I mean, if we do not, in fact, end child marriage, we can kiss goodbye to 6 of the 8 Millennium Development Goals. I mean, you are not going to be able to do anything about poverty because a child bride has to drop out of school, usually. That means she's not going to be employable, or if employable, at very, very low salaries. The health question, the universalizing primary school education, maternal health, you go on, and it seems like, I mean, why don't we get it into our heads that the solution is straightforward and simple? We won't make it without the women. God told Adam, you know, it's not good for this guy to be alone. It is part of who we are. It is that we aren't. I'm just thinking, for instance, of things like compassion, gentleness, caring. I mean, those are part of what it means to be feminine. And I think Hitler happened because his mom did not dangle him. And so he ended up with no sense of security and went out to try to prove that he was someone by clobbering others. Women are totally indispensable for the continued existence of our society.
Thank you.
I need help. I'm looking at the men. Please make sure that they don't have weapons.
Everybody's been disarmed, I hope. I'd like to turn the conversation a little bit to what specific kinds of interventions will actually make a difference. I mean, we can agree on the need for much greater equality, but of course, whether we're talking about South Africa or whether we're talking about the corporate suite in New York, there is profound inequality, and we all know that. So what can we actually do to go about creating that greater equality? And to the extent that many of the people here come from the business community, Talal Al-Zain, I'd like to ask you, you're somebody who has pioneered this. What can one do, and and what are the returns from a profit-making point of view? Why does it make good business sense for a company to take those kinds of steps?
Sure. Nick, first of all, I look at it from two angles to try to close the gap. One is, as Michelle said, it's the right thing to do. But second, and what really motivates me even more, is my ability to generate better performance and better profit for my institution and for the whole of the economy. If I look at the world population, female represent over 50% of the population. If we do not incentivize that big portion of the population to participate in the development of the global economies, we're never going to achieve. We're never going to achieve. We need the whole population. Forget about male, female. All of us, we're part of the same global economy and the world. So we need to work hand in hand. Of course, how can we close that gap? It is definitely, there are different ways. One way that I'm trying to follow, which is an individual interest because of the second reason that I pointed out, the economic reason. So in my own organization, what I made sure that I hire people based on merit, not because they're male, not because they're female, but I do want to have that diversity, because I truly believe that if I'm sitting around a table with my executives and they're all male, if I add another resource, that incremental value will be minimal, and eventually it will diminish actually. If I bring in a female to that table, that person will add different ideas, different angle of thinking, and probably, and not probably, I know that person will improve the performance of the whole team. Now, the way I look at it is the responsibility of the governments, of the policymakers, to initiate from the beginning, on the youth level, that to force it in the education of the youth, to show that male and female are both equal and both needs to contribute to the well-being of each country. Second, and I know it's a controversial area, but quotas. I really believe that quotas, but of course, to tie it with merit. I believe quotas are very important.
But isn't there an inconsistency there between quotas and merit? Isn't there a trade-off?
No, because there are, in all of the studies, Nick, okay, it shows that women, they do better in universities, and they actually contribute. If we look at the Fortune 500, 25 top companies that are, let's call them female-friendly, they showed higher performance.
And one of those is no doubt Facebook.
Definitely.
And Sheryl Sandberg gave a terrific speech, which I commend to you, at a commencement speech at Barnard last May, I guess it was, looking at these issues. And I really encourage you to go and Google it. But Sheryl, can you talk a little bit?
No.
About,
It's on YouTube, which is Google.
Can you talk a little bit about not only what the corporate sector needs to do to create greater opportunity for women employees, but also maybe what women themselves need to do?
Yeah, so I think all of these relate that what we basically have is an ambition gap all around the world. We have equality nowhere for women, and we have two very different forms of an ambition gap. In the developing world, as many people said here, we have an ambition gap at the societal level. We say we want to educate our girls as much as our boys, but we don't mean it. We don't really do the things we need to do. In the developed world, we have an ambition gap at the personal level. And the data shows this super clearly. So in the United States, women got 50% of the college degrees in 1981, 30 years ago, 31 years ago. And ever since then, women have made progress at every level. Every year they get more college degrees, more graduate degrees. They enter more jobs. They become more junior managers. They've stopped making progress at the top in the last 10 years. We're basically stuck in corporate America, 15%, 16% of C-level jobs and board jobs. If you look at the numbers around the rest of the developed world, the numbers are way worse, not better, and there's still complete stagnation. And if you poll women in the developed world, they're not as ambitious as men. So when there was a study in The Economist published, if you ask women to self-identify as very ambitious, in the United States, 36% will say that. In China or Brazil, Brazil is 59%, China is 66%, and India is 85%. And so, ironically, in the places where you have the equality of education and women are even exceeding men, you actually don't have the personal ambition levels. And I could go in all day of the reason, the root cause, but I'll hit them very quickly. We don't raise our daughters to be as ambitious as our sons. Last month, there were T-shirts sold at this Gymboree, which is a very large chain of like kid stores, that said "smart like daddy" for the boys and "pretty like mommy." Not in 1951, last month. Little girls are called bossy. Anyone at Davos was a girl who was called bossy? If you got to Davos, you were that. I was. I challenge you, go find someone and watch them call a little boy bossy. You won't see it. They're not bossy. That's the natural order of things. And then it goes all the way through. We've tried to equalize things in the workforce. We haven't equalized things in the home. In the United States, if a couple both work completely full-time, the woman does more than twice as much in the home as the man. You can't get to equality when you're not in the home. And the most important point is that success and likability are positively correlated for men and negatively correlated for women. As a man gets more powerful and successful, he is better liked. As a woman gets more powerful and successful, she is less liked. So from early childhood through marriage, through adolescence, all the way through, we reward men every step of the way for being leaders, for being assertive, for taking risk, for being competitive. And we teach women as young as 4, lay back, be communal. And until we change that at the personal level, we can't change this. And we really have to go out there and say, there's an ambition gap. We need our girls to be as ambitious as our boys. We need our boys to be as ambitious to contribute in the home. And we need our girls to be as ambitious to achieve in the workforce. Yeah.
Point well taken, Cheryl, but isn't there a danger that then you're letting CEOs off the hook? That they can say, well, you know, I'd love to create greater equality in the workforce, but until parents raise their daughters with greater equality, then I can't achieve it. I mean, I don't want to let people here off the hook in that sense.
I never let anyone off the hook. Good point. Equal maternity and paternity leave. How do we expect our husbands to do as much as the wives if they don't get equal leave? It's okay as a woman in the workforce, sometimes not always, to leave and take the child. We need to let men leave and take care of the child too. We need flexibility of all type. We need men to understand the success and likability point, and women. It is super important. If you watch, and I'm sure everyone here has had this experience, you watch the CEO, typically a man, talk about his senior team. He goes around, he talks about everyone's strengths and weaknesses, right? We've all seen this. And then he gets to the woman, the one woman who reports to him, and he says, she's great at her job. She's just not as well liked as the men, with no understanding that, of course she's not. That's what the data shows really clearly. We need to understand that when men negotiate for their own salaries, everyone wants to work with them more. But when women negotiate for their own salaries, everyone, men and women, want to work with them less. You teach people that. I talk about this hugely openly, And the next time a woman's sitting across from a man and she negotiates, they have a different reaction. And that really has to come from the top, an understanding that there are different challenges and the